My name is Mara Ellison, 52, and I've spent more than half my life building systems that never sleep. People at Verity Dynamics used to call me the quiet engine because I never raised my voice, and nothing moved until I said it could. At 9:02 on a Tuesday morning, the engine stopped. From the top floor of Verity's glass tower, alarms began to shriek through the intercom, monitors bled red across the open office. Words flashed in relentless sequence. License inactive. Original architect required. Phones rang like sirens. Assistants ran between cubicles clutching tablets that offered no answers. Someone shouted from the operations wing that the European servers had locked. A manager cursed his voice, cracking under panic. Then came the roar from the boardroom. "Nonsense! Find her! I'll sue her if I have to!" Marcus Aldrin's voice thundered through the glass walls, slicing through the chaos like a whip. The employees froze. No one dared look at him directly. He was the face of Verity the Visionary, the polished article on every magazine cover, and he was watching his empire choke in real time. Contracts were falling apart across 3 continents, and every partner was demanding the same thing me. The headlines began populating before noon. I could see them scrolling on my phone while I poured a second cup of coffee in my apartment overlooking the rainy streets of Seattle. Verity supply chain collapses. $1. 1 billion patents in limbo. The same rain that had followed me home yesterday now traced silent lines down the window. My phone buzzed again, calls from numbers I used to recognize. Voices that had ignored me only a day ago. I didn't answer. Marcus's rage echoed across news clips playing in the background. "This is sabotage," he shouted at a reporter's mic. "She won't get away with it." I took a slow sip of coffee, the bitterness grounding me. The city hummed beyond the glass. Indifferent, inside the calm, I felt the faint tremor of satisfaction that comes when truth finally breathes. He had fired me less than 24 hours ago. He just hadn't realized what that signature had cost him yet. The boardroom that morning smelled faintly of glass cleaner and new ambition. I'd sat at that long mahogany table for 25 years, through mergers, blackouts, and 100 crises that could have sunk us. But that day, the air felt different, sterile, rehearsed. Marcus Aldrin stood at the head of the table, his suit pressed to perfection, the kind of precision that hides decay. "Mara," he began, his tone almost paternal. "You've given this company everything, but it's time for new energy." He pushed a folder toward me, the thick paper whispered across the wood. "Sign here," he said. "We need someone younger." The room went still. Around us, the directors shifted uncomfortably, eyes fixed on their tablets, pretending not to hear the words that cut through decades of loyalty. At the far end, Sienna Marcus's granddaughter leaned against a chair. 24. Recently armed with an MBA and a glossy kind of confidence only youth can fake. My old company badge hung from her neck, its silver logo catching the light. She smiled as if she'd already inherited my chair, my projects, my identity. For a moment, I felt something inside me falter. Every sleepless night, every line of code, every sacrifice folded into those 5 minutes. No thank you. No acknowledgement. Just paperwork. I studied Marcus's hand, resting beside his pen. He didn't even meet my eyes. He believed this was clean, a tidy transition, a passing of the torch. He had no idea that his own signature, already stamped at the bottom of those papers, had just armed me. I signed slowly, letting the pen glide across the page with steady grace. Around us, silence spread, thick and suffocating. No one spoke. No one defended me. When it was done, I closed the folder and slid it back to him. "Good luck," I said quietly. It wasn't bitterness, just truth. He nodded, already turning toward Sienna as if I were smoke fading from the room. I stood, smoothed my jacket, and walked out without looking back. The door clicked shut behind me, and something inside me, something long, silent, finally woke. My office looked smaller once the nameplate came off the door. The walls, bare and colorless, reflected back 25 years of my life compressed now into a few cardboard boxes stacked on the carpet. I started with the photographs first. One of them showed my son, Noah, holding a plastic trophy from his first robotics competition. He'd been 10, missing a front tooth, grinning at me through a video call because I couldn't leave the office that night. The next photo was from a company gala, Marcus smiling beside me, champagne in hand. The caption in the press release calling me the backbone of Verity. I slipped it into the box face down. Outside, I could still hear the hum of the servers through the walls. That sound had been my constant companion, the pulse of the machines that never slept. Neither did I. Most nights. I remembered the fluorescent buzz above my desk at 2 a.m, the smell of burnt coffee, the ache in my eyes when dawn bled through the blinds. Those nights had built their empire, one exhausted heartbeat at a time. My phone vibrated on the desk. Noah's name lit up the screen. I hesitated before answering. "Hey, Mom, just wanted to check in. You coming to the conference this weekend?" I forced a smile he couldn't see. "Can't, sweetheart. I'm taking a little vacation." Finally, he laughed softly. "You vacation. That's new." "Yeah," I said. "Long overdue." I ended the call before my voice betrayed me. When I reached for the next drawer, my wrist brushed against the edge, and I saw the faint scar there, the thin, pale reminder of the day I collapsed at my desk. They'd called it exhaustion. I'd called it proof of devotion. The paramedics had strapped an oxygen mask over my face while I kept asking them to bring my laptop. Now, running my fingers over that same mark, I realized what it truly was, not proof of dedication, but of blindness. I sealed the last box, turned off the lights, and walked out, leaving the hum of the servers to someone else's sleepless nights. 7 years earlier, the night had turned the color of static. Every screen in Verity's operations center glowed with warnings, servers collapsing across 3 continents, contracts frozen, production lines stalling. Someone shouted about Taiwan, another about Frankfurt. The entire system was bleeding out, and I was the only one who knew where to apply pressure. I worked for 48 hours straight. Coffee, cold air, adrenaline, nothing touched the exhaustion. I remember my hands shaking as I rerouted firewalls, rewriting live code while my team watched in silence, afraid to interrupt. At dawn, the network stabilized. The building exhaled, the way a patient does after being pulled back from cardiac arrest. Marcus arrived hours later, his tie loose, his voice smooth again. "You saved us," he said, clapping my shoulder. The board applauded during the emergency debrief. I smiled, but something in me shifted that morning. I realized that Verity's lifeline didn't run through Marcus or his speeches. It ran through me, through the systems I had built, and the trust I had earned line by line, server by server. When the contracts for the new global licensing framework came across my desk a week later, I read every word. Then I wrote one more line. Clause 17.3b. If the original architect is removed without cause, all operational and intellectual property rights revert to said architect. It was meant as a safeguard, a way to ensure continuity if the board ever made another reckless decision. I filed it deep in the technical appendix, buried beneath network compliance language that no one but me would ever understand. They signed the documents without hesitation, grateful, exhausted, eager to move on from the crisis. Marcus even joked, "No one reads the fine print when Mara writes it." I smiled, sealing the contracts and backing them up on 3 mirrored servers. I didn't think I'd ever need Clause 17.3b, but that night, as I watched the sunrise over Lake Union, I saved a copy anyway, just in case loyalty ever ran out. The elevator hummed softly as it carried me down for the last time. My box of belongings was light too light for 25 years. When the doors slid open onto the empty lobby, I hesitated in front of the glass turnstiles. A guard nodded politely, not realizing this was goodbye. I raised my badge, pressed it to the scanner, and waited for the familiar sound. Beep. Access granted! The green light blinked like a secret that hadn't yet been told. I should have handed the badge over, but something made me slip it into my pocket instead. They hadn't revoked my credentials. They hadn't thought to. Marcus always believed control was about ownership signatures, meetings, headlines. He never understood that systems run on trust, and trust remembers its architect. Outside, the sky had already darkened, the kind of Seattle dusk that never truly ends. Rain clung to the glass walls as I stepped into the street, the smell of wet concrete rising with the mist. The city felt quieter than usual, as if holding its breath. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I brewed coffee at 2 a.m. and sat by the window. The badge lay on the table beside me, a small rectangle of plastic that still held power. Somewhere in the labyrinth of servers I had built, my name still lived in the root access logs. I opened my laptop not to interfere, not yet, but to watch the dashboards I still had clearance for. Every green line pulsed steadily, obedient. For now, anger had burned itself out. What replaced it was patience measured, steady, deliberate. I didn't need to do anything reckless. The code was already written, the clause already signed. It would happen the moment they tried to operate without me. When dawn arrived, the rain was still falling, drawing long silver streaks down the window pane. I closed the laptop, wrapped my hands around the cooling mug, and whispered to the quiet room. Any moment now. The city outside began to wake, unaware that somewhere deep in its digital veins, something was waiting to remember my name. It started quietly, almost politely, with an email from Germany. Subject line urgent, license inactive, original architect required. The message was short, stripped of emotion. Until validation from the registered architect is received, all Verity-linked shipments are suspended. No accusation, no explanation, just a door closing. I read it on my laptop while the morning light crept across my kitchen. The clock read 9:07 a.m., exactly 24 hours since Marcus had told me to sign my own exit. By noon, the silence broke into static. Screens in Verity's command center flickered as notifications stacked like falling dominoes. Singapore froze its logistics queue, citing the same clause. Canada followed by evening, halting all scheduled payments. Inside the tower, I imagined the panic spreading, assistants running between departments, executives barking half-formed orders, the sound of Marcus's temper echoing through the glass. I didn't need to be there to see it. I had lived that chaos too many times before. Sienna, fresh from her first week of power, took the stage in a hastily arranged investor call. Her voice carried that polished confidence she'd practiced in classrooms, not battlefields. "It's just a database glitch," she said, smiling into the camera. "Our engineers are already resolving it. Operations will resume within hours." For a brief moment, calm returned. Stock tickers steadied, investors exhaled. Marcus, pacing behind the camera, believed her because he needed to. But code doesn't care about confidence. At 4:12 p.m., the illusion cracked, one by one. Monitors around the room shifted to red. The message appeared in every time zone, every subsidiary, every partner terminal, contract invalid, original architect missing. The silence that followed was heavier than the alarms. Somewhere downtown, I watched the reflection of the city lights ripple across the bay. The hum of traffic below felt like the pulse of a living thing, steady and inevitable. I closed my laptop, the red alerts still flickering across the world, and let the sound of rain drown the faint echo of Marcus Aldrin's voice shouting into a storm he couldn't control. The rain hadn't stopped all week, turning Pike Street into a river of reflections. I sat in the corner of a small cafe, the kind with chipped mugs and the smell of roasted beans heavy in the air. My laptop stayed closed. I wasn't here for work. I was here because I knew, sooner or later, Marcus would come looking. He arrived without an umbrella, his suit darkened by the downpour. For a moment, he stood by the door, scanning the room until his eyes found mine. The years had drained from his face in just a few days, his charm replaced by the pale strain of someone losing control. "Mara," he said softly as he approached, "you always liked this place." I didn't answer. The barista filled the silence with the hiss of steamed milk. He sat down, shaking water from his cuffs. "You've made your point. The board's in chaos. The press won't leave my doorstep." He leaned in, lowering his voice. "I can fix this for both of us. Sell the patents back. Name your price." I stirred my coffee slowly, watching the swirl of cream dissolve. "You can't buy back what you signed away." I said, "I was wrong," he admitted. "Firing you, it was impulsive. I let people talk me into it." His voice cracked, and for a fleeting second, I almost saw the man who'd once believed in me. But pity had no place here. I reached into my bag and pulled out the old watch he had given me on my 10th anniversary with Verity. The gold plating had dulled, the engraving nearly faded for your timeless dedication. I set it on the table between us. "You already paid," I said quietly. Marcus stared at it, speechless. Rain drummed against the window, filling the pause he couldn't break. I stood, leaving the watch where it lay, and walked out into the wet gray morning. Behind me, the door closed with the soft chime of a bell, small, final, and strangely freeing. The boardroom at Verity was no longer a place of control. It was a crime scene. The air carried the weight of sleepless nights, coffee gone cold, and the quiet panic of men who'd built their fortunes on borrowed certainty. Every screen along the wall pulsed with red notifications, like open wounds refusing to close. Marcus stood at the head of the table, his tie gone, his eyes bloodshot. "We just need time," he insisted. "It's a contractual misfire. We'll override it by morning." But no one met his gaze. The board members sat in rigid silence until the door opened and the company's lead counsel, Adrian Hale, entered with a laptop tucked under his arm. His movements were slow, deliberate, as if he were approaching a confession rather than a meeting. He connected the laptop to the projector. The lights dimmed. A single document filled the screen, the termination agreement Marcus had slid across the table to me only days ago. At the bottom, his signature glared back in blue ink. Adrian's voice was steady but low. Clause 17.3b was triggered the moment Ms. Ellison's dismissal was processed without cause. He clicked to highlight the text, glowing pale gold across the wall. "If the original architect is removed without cause, all operational and intellectual property rights revert to said architect absolutely and irrevocably." The words hung there, merciless in their simplicity. "You fired her without cause," Adrian continued. "Legally, every active patent and operational license, 42 in total, now belongs to Mara Ellison." A director at the far end exhaled a shaky laugh that broke halfway through. "You didn't fire her," he muttered, voice hollow. "You signed your own death warrant." Marcus's mouth opened, but no words came. The monitors reflected in his eyes, rows of red alerts blinking, "License transferred." He looked like a man staring at his own obituary. No one spoke again. The only sound was the faint whir of the projector, still casting my name, Mara Ellison, across the glass wall. The empire he'd claimed as his own was gone, and the signature that had sealed my fate had just rewritten his. The morning after the board meeting, Seattle woke to headlines that burned brighter than the sunrise. Verity implodes, 1.1 billion patent transfer confirmed. The story swept through every business network within hours, each outlet circling the same phrase, "original architect rights reverted." My name was everywhere spoken, printed, analyzed by strangers who'd never heard it before yesterday. They aired the old security footage first, the one from the day I left. The clip showed me walking out of the Verity lobby, box in hand, the rain catching light on the glass doors as they closed behind me. No words, no tears, no glance backward. Someone online captioned it, "The Walk of Quiet Power." It spread faster than the company's own press releases ever had. Comments followed from across the world: engineers, office workers, people who had been dismissed, replaced, overlooked. This is what dignity looks like. They fired the wrong person. I didn't read them all, but I felt the hum of solidarity through the screen. Sienna vanished first. Her social media pages went dark overnight, every photo wiped clean, every post deleted, the corporate selfies, the hashtags, the bright slogans about success all gone. Silence replaced her captions. Marcus tried to survive longer. Cameras caught him outside the building, shielding his face from the barrage of microphones. The man who once commanded boardrooms now stumbled through reporters' questions, his tie crooked, his voice breaking. When asked if he would stay on as CEO, he muttered, "For now," though everyone already knew the answer. He resigned that evening. From my apartment window, I watched the last of the day's light scatter across the bay. The news anchor's voice murmured in the background, listing resignations, market losses, speculations. I turned down the volume. The world had finally recognized what I had built. But the sound of it didn't feel like triumph. It felt like quiet air after a long storm. For the first time in years, I took a deep, unhurried breath and let it fill every corner of me. Weeks passed before the final papers arrived, thin envelopes carrying the weight of everything that had come undone. The signatures were stamped, the seals embossed. My name, Mara Ellison, stood alone beside the words sole owner and architect of 42 registered patents. There was no ceremony, no applause, just the quiet click of the mailbox lid and the soft hum of the city beyond my window. I sat for a while, tracing the embossed letters with my thumb. After so many years of giving pieces of myself away, something finally belonged entirely to me. I didn't return to Verity. There was nothing left there to reclaim. Instead, I rented a small workspace near the waterfront, a converted warehouse that still smelled faintly of salt and cedar. The windows opened onto the Puget Sound, where ferries crossed the gray water in steady rhythm. A few of my old colleagues joined me, people who had stayed through the long nights and the silent collapses. Together, we began again, smaller but cleaner, lighter. I spent the first weeks rebuilding not the systems, but the trust I'd once misplaced. We designed software meant to protect creators, to ensure that no architect, no engineer, no quiet builder would ever be erased from their own work. I taught the younger staff to read every contract, to question every clause, to never sign in haste. One afternoon, a message arrived from an international firm based in Zurich. They offered a position as Global Innovation Advisor, broad oversight, creative freedom, and no ceiling except the one I chose to build. I accepted, not out of pride or vengeance, but out of the need to make sure no one else would have to bury their worth in fine print. That evening, I walked to the window of my new office. The ferries glided across the water, their trails catching the light of the sinking sun. The air smelled of rain and new beginnings. For the first time in decades, I wasn't holding anything together. I was simply letting it begin.